Chairman.
Microphones on, please, councillors.
I'll call the meeting to order and welcome you all here. First of all, I'll go to 1.1, which is apologies for absence.
We have an apology from Councillor Duffy for lateness, but no apologies for absence. Good evening, Councillor McDonald is on Zoom. That's it.
Move the lateness.
Move for lateness. And what about the recommendation for councillors attending via Zoom?
Is that too? Second.
All in favour? Against? Carried. Item 1.2, live stream and recording. This council meeting is being live streamed and recorded. By speaking at the council meeting, you agree to be live streamed and recorded. Please ensure that if and when you speak at this council meeting that you ensure you are respectful to others and use appropriate language at all times. Orange City Council accepts no liability for any defamatory or offensive remarks or gestures made during this course of this council meeting. Recording of this council meeting will be made for administration purposes. Item 1.3 is acknowledgement of country. I would like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri people who are the traditional custodians of the land. I would also like to pay respect to elders both past, present and of the Wiradjuri nation and extend that respect to other Aboriginal Australians who are present. Item 1.4, declarations of interest. Does any councillor wish to declare any conflicts of interest in any matter for consideration at the council meeting tonight?
Mr Mayor,
Councillor Evans.
I'd like to declare a significant non-pecuniary interest in item 5.4, the funding for the 10 for 10 mentor program, as I am a mentor in the program. So I'll leave the chamber and not vote on the item. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Evans. Any other declarations of interest? No, no declarations of interest.
I was waving to
Oh, right.
Sorry, Mr Mayor.
Okay, there are no registered speakers, therefore there's no open forum at tonight's council meeting. Mayoral minutes. Yeah, that's the JO meeting that we had in Sydney on the 26th of May. I'll move that.
Yeah, I'll second it.
Thanks. Yep, Councillor Miletto.
Just a question in regards to the meeting, Mr Mayor, in regards to the electric vehicle fast charging stations, and I see that the GO were ordering applications, I think it is, by 2.5 hours. And within that report is Orange to receive 2 dual ports. I'm just wondering whether there's any council staff or here who can tell me how many electric vehicles we do have registered in Orange.
I'll take that, Mr Chair. Through you, Mr Chair. No, I can't answer that. We see a regular trickle at the NRMA charger out the back here, but I cannot answer that accurately.
There's also, I think there's one at Heifer Station and there's a charger at Ross Hill as well.
But the cars, no, can't tell.
The reason why I asked the question is I understand by reading that report that there's the intention to put one of these electric vehicle fast charging stations in the Woolworths car park, which is obviously owned by Orange City Council. Just wondering whether there's been any plan to install one of those fast charging stations at any of the sporting fields or the sporting precincts, such as Jack Brabham Park, which would appear to be a logical place to put one, considering the amount of people who travel from Sydney to Orange and will be looking at sporting events. Yep. And they'll be looking at an opportunity to charge their cars whilst they're either attending their sporting events or even as far as people who want to engage in physical exercise go out to Jack Brabham, whether it's people who drop their cars off there to ride their bikes or people go walking families. I just thought it may be an opportunity to have one installed there. I do declare a conflict of interest because I am a president of the Football Association, but there is a lot of work going out there, and I think it might be a place which would have a higher intake of use, that's all.
Yeah, we could look at that, Council, and I suppose with the new sporting facility, sporting precinct coming on, you know, that could be part of the design of maybe one of the stadiums. So, yeah, we'll take that on notice, but yeah. Councillor Kinghorn.
Yeah, I have a question. I was reading about the benefits of aggregated procurement, so saving the group over $5 million since 2018, which is a good job. But I'm curious about how much of that saving is ours and how much does it cost us to be in the joint organisation?
You can take that.
Read, Mr. Chair, our cost coming up will be $144,000
Is that a year?
for the year. After this meeting, we got our figure, and I think it was 355,000 in savings through
For the year.
for the year
Okay.
gone aggregated procurement. So it's well worth it.
Can I just ask a following question then? I noticed reading the report that I think it was Upper Hunter or someone like that wanted to become a
Yep, and lift.
associate member, and it was $2,000 or something, wasn't it?
It's Upper Lachlan, perhaps.
Somewhere up there. I'm just wondering what they would receive for their $2,000 compared to our 144.
It's an interesting, as the Mayor can tell you, we also have interest coming into Orange 360 from areas.
And the joint regional organiser. This has another city town that wants to come in, which is further east.
Generally, the members tend to say no. Adjunct members for $2,000. And the reason they say no is that adjunct members, I mean, you just get all the value for a lower fee. It doesn't seem to make sense.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? No, do I have to move that?
No, it's a mere minute.
Okay, I'll move on to item 3, which is confirmation of the previous minutes of the meeting. I have a mover. Moved by Councillor Duffy, seconded by Councillor Floyd. All in favour? Against? Carried. I'll move on to item 4.1, which is notices of motion and rescission motion. And we have one in front of us on page 30. Councillor Peterson, you're moving that?
I am. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Can I have a seconder, please? Thanks, Councillor Greenhalgh. Councillor Peterson.
So the motion I'd like to raise is that council staff modify certain grass islands in Cook and Robinson Parks, allow easier access for wheelchairs or similar. Cook Park and Robinson Park are occasions for community events such as Food Week and Australia Day. Stalls will usually be set up on these grass islands, surrounded by paths. I sent a photo to councillors today of the vertical area of a few centimetres between the grass and the footpath. Unfortunately, it is a impassable barrier for a heavy wheelchair, probably difficult for prams and four-wheel walkers and similar. The Ageing and Access Committee would like to investigate possibilities to overcome this. We feel this would need to balance ease of access with any potential cost, and also making sure that two beautiful parks don't look ugly with big ramps everywhere. We were hypothesising a very small concrete sort of triangle would allow a slope instead of a vertical barrier, but happy to take advice from staff as to what is feasible and practical.
Councillor Mileto.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I totally support notice of motion. I guess the question which I have is how would you make people with disabilities aware of where these areas are when we have larger events such as night markets, things like that? People like yourself and my brother is also in a similar position to you, is okay being local because you know where they're, but people are visiting, how would they be aware where these access points would be without having to erect signage? Maybe that can be taken on notice for staff and get back to us. I just see that as an issue when you've got large crowds there.
Yep.
That's all. Thank you.
Councillor Duffy.
Apologies, we can't hear Councillor Duffy.
Got to speak. He hasn't got a mic.
Okay, possibilities.
Want me to repeat it? Well, I'll just go over a little bit. But as I said, Councillor Peterson, I commend you on this one here, but I think you should be saying not the possibility, I think it should be done.
I think if you read it, Councillor Duffy, you'll see that it says that council staff modify certain grass islands. It doesn't say anything about possibilities. So it's there on page
modify.
30.
That's all right. I'm happy with that.
Not in the
But I don't
recommendation.
want to be interrupted by any man
It
who's
needs to be in the recommendation.
All right.
Okay, Councillor Duffy's got the floor.
right?
Yeah.
Hey, but in saying that, the opportunity can be done in the September mini budget. And as for access and getting the information out there, we have a very few good, strong people on the Ageing and Access Committee there, and they are often turn up and take it by the throat, and they will deliver it. I have no problem with that at all.
Thanks, Councillor Duffy. Councillor, was there any other speaker? Councillor Powell.
Yeah, I absolutely support the motion in relation to the actual curvage. And I think if I look around the city after reading this here, you see the actual painted items, whether it's cemented in yellow, which is only a metre or so wide for access to, including some of the shops around town. So I think it's no real issue, but there is a costing involved, so probably working through that aspect of that, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Mallard.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and I also completely support this motion. I do want to note in sharing info with some people that this was on the agenda. I did have someone point out lots of other accessibility issues at Cook Park, like that you obviously at the moment can't access the Sunken Rose Garden, the Gildery Cottage, the toilets, and the paths generally are not necessarily that accessible. So I think there's a lot to look at. Take Councillor Duffy's point. I mean, I think rolling ahead with this is important. I also, if this came out of discussions with the Ageing and Access Community Committee, I guess I want to note process-wise, while I'm happy to support this notice of motion, I'd encourage that committee to make recommendations that they come to. The way our structure is set up is that community committees can make recommendations, and that then brings in the expertise, empowers those community members. So it's not up to a councillor to put the notice of motion, and we can then adopt those resolutions. So I'd love to see the community committee get on with doing this work to generate ideas, get the relevant staff input, and then if we've got any specific recommendations we need to adopt, they can bring them through to us. Thanks.
Councillor Kinghorn.
Yep, I think this is an absolute no-brainer, so completely support it. Just in relation to letting people know where the access points were, is there a little map? I'm just trying to remember from the night markets whether there's an online map when...
App or something.
Mr. Chair, I don't know. Councillor Director Maunda was just saying bollards would be placed, if vertical bollards for permanent structures. That would be the way to tell. But staff will work out the detail, I'm sure, and start working on these.
A point of clarification, please, Mr Mayor.
Yeah, sure.
So is Councillor Mallard asking that the recommendation be changed for this to be sent back to the Ageing, Access and Ageing Committee for them to make?
No, but I'm saying that in future all councillors should be aware that if a community committee is discussing something, then they can resolve to make a recommendation to council. It doesn't need a notice of motion.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Against? Unanimous. I'll move on to item 5.1, which is recommendations from and resolutions from policy committees on page 31.
Move the recommendations.
Seconded by Councillor Duffy. Any speakers? No speakers. I'll put the motion. All in favour?
I could have.
So fast.
I could have.
Item 5.2.
Happy to move it.
Can I just finish? Yeah, I know. Is on starts on page 65, and the recommendations on page 67 and 68. I have a mover in Councillor Duffy, a seconder. Councillor Greenhouse. Speakers.
Yeah, I'm quite happy to speak for it, Mr Chairman. The first thing I must do is acknowledge the work of the staff. We all should be fairly full aware that we weren't elected till the end of December, or in early December, and we really haven't started getting teeth into this until probably just recently. And I applaud the idea of having a mini budget in September, which allows us to go a little bit more in depth. A couple of the other things that I do note is that the government approved 2.5% increase in the budget, which is welcome. I don't know where IPART have had their head for a number of years, for the last 12 months, but we've seen fuel, we've seen groceries, we've seen everything go up, and it's just been a massive burden. We've seen the cost of materials go up 30 to 40% and everything there. So if you're worried about anything like that, we know this is just only going to with that a little bit, and plus that it is, if we'd lost that, we'd lost the compounding over the years forever. But I just want to go back to the budget itself. I commend the Mayor on this too, making his statement with regards to footpath, wanting the $600,000 there for that. I think no matter where you go around Orange, and people get annoyed that they get held up a little bit, but by hell they do really like the fact that the footpaths are being done, and maybe not in their area, but they at least them get some concentrating on what's actually happening. I noticed that one of our biggest things is the Southern Feeder. We're going to continue with that. And we're also going to do the Planetarium Conservatorium, and we probably need the Planetarium. If you saw social media last night, we got red things flying around our fire, but I think that's just Ewoks in the air. But the other thing is the sporting precinct. There's no money of ours in the sporting precinct, but it's there. And there are a lot of other items there that are there, but there's no money there for them. It's just flagging our future, and I think that's a common sense thing to do. And I won't go through and name those things, but I think overall it's a good budget, but it's something that we can get our teeth into in September, because there are a number of things here we want to keep an eye on, and a couple of other things we want to bring in. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Mileto.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just before I speak, can I just seek clarification with regards to the recommendations? Are they going to be spoken about in Seniarum, where we vote on each one individually, or are we just going to do them all at once? There are 5.
Up to you guys.
We weren't going
You already
to.
moved the motion, so you'll have to do an amendment.
You want to do it separately? Right, Mr.
I'm at
C.
the hands of the other councillors, I guess, because there are important issues.
Move the recommendation, which is the 5. So if you want to move an amendment to deal with each one separately.
I'm happy to do them all at once.
You do want to speak on council?
Yeah, I just wanted to make the comment and
Yep.
with regards to the report itself. I think it's an excellent report, and thanks for the council staff for putting it together, but also the community, Mr. Mayor, who, with regards to the feedback which we received, submissions, etc. Just a lot of the comments which I did see, I think there may be a lack of understanding with regards to the mountain bike track and how that the money was going to pay for some further research. I think there's a money indicated in the budget, but how that money is going to be spent or whatever, or it's coming from. If you could just comment on that.
Yeah. So, Mr. Chair, through you, councillors, in the budget, there's a few projects there. One is the mountain bike project. One is the, I'll think of a few, the aquatic centre expansion, the
Civic Centre upgrade.
civic theatre upgrade. There's a couple more there. Those projects are placed in the budget as projects that council wants to happen in the future, perhaps. They're unfunded, but we flag it in our 4-year plan that they're projects that we want to work on. I've written about that on page 72, I think. And I talk about several other projects are similarly listed, such as the theatre expansion, aquatic centre expansion. The project is still in the approval phase and will require further council consideration to proceed. So there is no cash in the budget for the mountain bike project going forward. The mountain bike project is in its assessment phase. We've done $500,000 worth of environmental assessment. It's in a hold point. To go forward, we need to bring it back to council. We have a document from the state called a SEARS document, which is an assessment document, which outlines the steps you have to take to get to the sort of exhibition phase. We will do that in the future. We've got a few things to sort out before that would come before council. And I'm talking months before we do it. In this budget tonight, there is no cash for the mountain bike.
Or for any of those
Or for
projects.
the theatre expansion or for the aquatic centre expansion. These are projects that need to be planned forward. At the mini budget, we need to talk with you about those sort of projects.
And I think it's reading the submissions, etc., and your report, and thank you for that. I think it's important that we understand that, because certainly some of those projects are people are fairly passionate about. And for myself, who hasn't made a decision on certain those items, I think it would give me a better understanding relating to, especially with the mountain bike track, relating to cultural environment and biodiversity. I believe that need to have a comprehensive understanding about how that's going to occur moving forward, if it does at all. So, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Miletto. Councillor Greenhalgh.
I've just got a couple of questions. On page 67, just the graph there. So could I just have some clarification around the difference between business village and Orange Central business area?
Fortunately, we have acting CFO McDonald up the back here. Thanks, Pat.
You, Mr. Mayor. The business rates, the Central Business District, which is mainly about William Street, to Bing, to Lords, a bit of Mulder, and up to about Hill. That's called the Central Business District, and that's got a special rate, which doesn't apply to anywhere else in town from a business point of view. They also pay a business rate which covers every business in town, whether they be in the CBD, out at Leewood, Rambler, wherever. And I just can't remember the last one.
Business village. So really, the CBD explains itself, but yeah, the difference between the business and the business village.
The business village. There are some businesses in Lucknow and Spring Hill, so they pay a lesser rate due to the services available in those areas.
Thank you.
Is that all?
Yeah, and also I'd just like to make comment as well, Councillor Miletto. I thought it was really important, and the community engagement that we got was fantastic, with 75% of the people that completed the survey concerned about affordable and social housing and seeking more diversity in housing. They're all topics that we covered off at the conference as well. And, 59% of people showed support for council to provide more recreational options for young people in Orange, which, we need to be congratulated. We've been doing that with the parks and so forth. And 59% of people also wanting to address problems of poverty and social inequality in Orange. I think that's a really important subject as well that we need to start looking at moving forward. So I just wanted to note those down. Thank you.
Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll keep it brief. Just firstly, on the recommendations, it's just a quick typo. I'm assuming it's a typo. Recommendation 4A. It probably should be 2022-23, not 32.
3, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that.
And just secondly,
hold on. No, hold on.
10-year plan. 10-year plan, isn't
22.
it?
It's it's correct. It's a 10-year
correct.
plan.
Okay. I just wanted to double check.
32.
22. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
it
correct.
just looks like it's a typo, but it's okay. Excellent. Thank you. And Councillor Greenhalgh just sort of basically said everything I was going to say about the affordable housing. So I think it's really important that we've started having these conversations in council and also at a broader level at the NGA this week. So that's sort of all I had to say on it.
Thanks, Councillor McDonald. Councillor King.
Yep, so I've got a bit to say on this. So I've been hassling Mr. Waddell and Mr. Maunder about Orange rate levels and expenditure and how we compare to other councils for several months now, so they're probably a bit sick of me, but they have answered my questions, so thank you for that. There is a perception in the Orange community that we have very high rates, and we're up there. We have the 15th highest residential rates in New South Wales and the 17th highest business rates. But in my attempts to find out why that is, they have actually answered my questions. So I just thought I'd share some of that for people who are watching online. So we actually spend 75% more than similar councils on community services, education, housing and community amenities, which is pretty good. I think we should be pretty proud of that. We do spend a bit less on roads per kilometre. So if anybody who's telling me that other people have more roads, if it's done on a per kilometre basis, then that's not really relevant. But anyway, I was querying why we've got 50 more staff than Bathurst, which is a similar sized council. And so it's been explained to me that we have our own 3 childcare centres, occasional care, after schools care. We run our own pool. There are youth services and multiple social and community services, and that explains why we have more staff. Our library and art gallery are open 7 days a week, and they run multiple education programs. We have more green space, and major parks have a higher level of service than some other councils. And this is quite a big one. The pensioner discount on rates.
Yep.
Pensioners are entitled to a mandatory 50% discount. We offer an extra 10% in Orange, which equates to approximately $480,000 per year. So I just thought I'd put that out there. So now that it's been explained to me, I'm happy to support that. Except I've now discovered that this is all in one, all 5 of them. And number 5, which is the councillor remuneration, I can't support that. So it means I'm not going to be able to support the budget after all this. So can we talk about that one separately?
Well, you could move an amendment.
Unless someone wants to move an amendment that we do it. Councillor Duffy, will you be happy to do it singly?
In seriatim.
Seriatim.
I'll move a motion that we do it that way.
Yeah, isn't it? It's not an amendment, it's a procedural motion, isn't it?
I mean, seriatim, one separate.
I wanted to go through as a block number.
No, he wants to do block. It's an amendment.
Cast by the previous council and moved by the previous council.
So,
I'll ask for amendment then.
I'll second the amendment to move
Second
it
that.
to
All those in favour? Against? So we'll do them one by
Mr. Mayor,
one.
I'll speak to the amendment. I think it's only fair. I think I congratulate Councillor Kinghorn for telling us and the community about actually all of those points that she's covered. And there are many people and there are many councillors who have come on council over the years who have been very critical of the rates. I think it's very good that you've let everyone know what they are. Congratulations on that. So, yeah.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Mayor.
Any other speakers? Councillor Mallard.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I want to begin by echoing Councillor Duffy's comments in commending the staff. This has been a huge amount of work on a compressed timeframe. And I first want to comment on the community strategic plan. I think comments from Councillor Greenhalgh have gone to some of the key things that we've seen go into that. And it is really heartening to see that community input that has driven it and the additional things we're recognising in this community strategic plan that we need to do in terms of tackling inequality, disadvantage and housing affordability pressures in particular. So, yeah, I think it's fantastic that we're adopting that document, and I think it's going to be great as we now go to the mini-budget process and the next 2 years of work that we can do, that we can really look at driving those areas. The other thing I did want to comment on is to note the number of submissions that there were relating to the mountain bike trail, and I thank Councillor Miletto for asking the questions and the CEO for giving the clarification, so it's clear what's happening here in terms of the budget that's being approved tonight. Is not the point where we're addressing those issues, but I do think they are important issues. I share the concerns about environmental and cultural reasons to have significant reservations about this project. I also think in terms of the economics of it, there are massive issues that we are going to need to discuss as a council. And I do note that the CEO described it, I think, as these are projects that we might want to do the council might want to do in the future. This council hasn't had a conversation yet about whether we want that project in the future. And I look forward to us starting to have that conversation. And I hope councillors in seeing those submissions have got some starting information. I think there's a lot that we need to discuss around that. Thanks.
Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I need to say my support for Councillor Minetto's comments about the mini budget coming up for some more information about the cost of various projects. As I've also been in email discussion with the CEO, would like at that opportunity in that process to talk a bit about other sort of expenditure and what we can do as a responsible governing body to have a look at all of our expenditure at that time.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to the acting CFO, I've just got a couple of questions relating to the budget and the long-term financial plan. Relation to the budget, note we're selling off a couple of plant equipment and assets. I know that comes at a profit to us, but long term, does that affect how much we're then spending on contractors to do work that we now can't do?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The figures in the budget are split. The capital income for plant sales is kept separate than the expenditure. So while it looks like we might be selling off plant, we're actually replacing it at the same time. It just shows up under the capital expenditure. I think the current general policy is we're replacing the plant and there'll be no contractors taking over all that work. So if you've got to look at two items at once.
Thank you. And just in the long-term financial plan, could you elaborate a bit on the deficit and restricted assets past 2023?
Restricted assets are the money that is either externally restricted or internally restricted, usually set by the state government, or internal restrictions at council. The issue with restrictions, they go up and down, depends. I'll use Waterfront as an example. You might build a water treatment plant every 50 years. What you do is you put money aside. That's basically a deficit to restrictions. You're actually putting the money into restrictions so that in 50 years' time you've got $50 million to pull out to fund that, and that's just prudent management. But you get some years you're pulling a lot of money out of restrictions that you've saved, and it's like going on holidays. The last 2 years everybody's saved up money, haven't been able to go anywhere. All of a sudden everybody's heading to Bali and everywhere else, so their restrictions are coming down. So they've saved for 2 years, it's coming down again. The restrictions work pretty much the same way.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Evans. I just want to echo most of the councillors' comments about the staff. Great work pulling this together at such short time. The other thing I think we need to be reminding the community about is the pensioner rebate that Councillor Kinghorn brought up, that is available out there. So I'd encourage any pensioners out there that aren't on that rebate system to contact council about getting on it. But yeah, great work, council staff. So we're going to deal with these separately. Item number 1. Do I need to read out the recommendation?
No, just as printed, I think.
As printed, recommendation 1. All in favour? Against? Unanimous. Number 2, as printed. All in favour? Against? Unanimous. Number 3, as printed. All in favour? Against? Carried. Item 4, all in favour? Against? Carried. Item 5, all in favour? Against?
Councillor Kinghorn, Councillor Floyd, and Councillor Peterson.
Can I say something about that, or is it too late?
Yep. Mr. Mayor, I apologise.
I was just about to say that, Councillor Whitten. Councillor Kinghorn.
So I'm not going to carry on the way I did about the super, because it's the same argument. I just don't think it's appropriate at this time to do that. But what I'd actually like to do is perhaps invite everybody who will be in receipt of this, if it does get approved, which it clearly will, to perhaps donate that money to a fund that could then be used to subsidise entry to the indoor playground for socioeconomically disadvantaged children. That would help to, the whole bit about the poverty and social inequity in Orange was a big issue in the CSP, and I just thought that perhaps that might be a better use of the funds. So I was just wondering if anybody else was interested in doing that, or just me.
Councillor McDonald.
Could I just make a comment on that? I actually would consider myself as a single parent who was also receiving Centrelink to not be in a position to do that. I appreciate that not everyone's in my position, and some people are in a slightly better financial position, and I think that's, if you can afford to do it, that's a nice sentiment. But I'm paycheck to paycheck, so I just wanted to make that comment that it's not all councillors are they're in a position to be able to do that.
We voted on this.
Yeah.
Well, I'll have to then. We have voted on this already. I've just been told by the CEO. So it's over. Thank you. I'll move on to item 5.3, which is, but let's any individual councillor who wants to do something like that get in contact with the CEO, and then they can do that. Whatever they want to do. Item 5.3, statement of investments on page 159. Moved by Councillor Duffy. Seconder.
Seconded.
Councillor Floyd. Any discussion? Being no discussion, I'll put the motion. All in favour? Against? Carried. Item 5.4, which is applications for funding on page 165.
I'll move the recommendation. Oh, sorry.
Councillor Evans is
We've got to
leaving the
wait.
chamber momentarily. You want to stop the meeting while Councillor Evans leaves the chamber?
Yep.
Do?
Stop, David. Councillor, I'm just trying to find it on my iPad. Hang on.
I got a question when you.
Can I have a mover and a
I'll
seconder,
move it.
please? Moved by
Move the
councillor Mallard,
recommendation.
by councillor Greenhalgh.
Question, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, councillor Witness.
Now, the RDA is a fantastic organisation. That is a federally funded a vehicle that actually provides funding. Is it?
Just asked me about a declaration.
I'm just.
Sorry,
Take your time.
sorry.
That's all right.
I'm going to have to declare an interest in this Glenroy Heights swimming one because I have a nephew and a niece that work. Sorry, I didn't declare that interest.
Meeting from where you are. Just run it from there, Councillor Power.
Not a
Sorry,
problem.
Councillor Whitten, we had a
It's all right. It's got to be a case.
sudden declaration.
Mr. Mayor, so the RDA is a fantastic organisation. It's a body that actually is a vehicle that gives out monies. Is it normal that they would be asking for funding? Not that I've got a problem with it, but I'm just.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I can answer this, they did this last year, I think, or perhaps and the year before. You raise an interesting question, but all I can answer with is they did last year.
Okay, so
and
we have
this
a
is for a
precedent, yeah.
specific.
But it's for a great thing. So.
And I need to be careful because I'm one of the mentors.
Yes, Mr. Tony Milano.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. My question relates to the first item. It's the 2015 funding for Glenroy Public Schools swimming program to provide the school with pool or swimming and towels for the students can borrow as needed. Whilst I support the recommendation, I've just got some questions with regards to whether the swimming program is contained within the educational syllabus or a program. The reason I ask the question is because what I'm concerned about, if it isn't, whether approving such a recommendation will lead to a precedent, for other schools to do the same. If I can just ask the director to answer that question to start with.
To you, Mr. Chair, the cost of the actual lessons is funded by the state, so there's no cost to the school or the student for that component. When the participants, however, are responsible to pay a number of things, so that includes transport, entrance fees, swimming apparel, swimmers, goggles, towels, etc. So those elements aren't covered by the funding from the state. We've had a couple of conversations around this matter with a couple of schools now, and it is a barrier for some students. So that's why they've sought this funding with us. We're doing some work around what that might look like if every student that was participating in this program sought some funding. But that's we haven't finalised that work as yet.
Thank you. Certainly, I agree that learning to swim is an important attribute for any person to have. I guess what does disappoint me, that if there isn't sufficient funding within the educational budget, whether the relevant minister isn't aware of that, perhaps that Orange City Council should write to the Minister for the Education, alerting them in the shortfall in the budget, perhaps sharpen their pencils, allocate some further funds where the, whilst I agree that it's an important issue, the ratepayers of Orange are paying for this, and I'm sure they won't have an issue with that. But if we look at the application, originally the school, I think, was asking for 20,000, where within our small budget, our small budget donations and grant program, we can only give a maximum of $2,500. So that leaves a shortfall of $17,500, which has got to come from somewhere. So I'm interested to know in how a school who is in need of funding, how and where they're going to get that from long term, because this is going to be a program or a need which is going to be rolling on for years to come. So it's just not going to be a one-off. So maybe the education department needs to be aware of this issue, because it wouldn't only affect Glenroy Heights Public School, it would affect other schools in Orange which have disadvantaged students, certainly around other areas of New South Wales. So it's not only restricted to Orange. So I would like to make a recommendation that the Orange City Council write to the Minister for Education alerting them of the shortfall in funding and get a response to them.
Well, Mr. Chair, we'll write that letter. Sorry. Yep. We can write that letter as a matter of writing, if Council's happy.
I agree with what Councillor Miletto said. I think it is important, however, to note that the goods that they're asking for are actually tools of the trade as such for the children to participate in the activities. With 50% of the children participating in the program being identified as Indigenous. So I think, I'm very happy to support this motion. I know, in our football club at times we've had children as well that don't have football boots and so forth. And, we like to do everything we possibly can as a community to support those things by having, other children bring in boots and so forth. I think it's a great idea what Glenroy is trying to do. The children obviously aren't going to keep the swimmers and the towels. They're obviously going to go back into the clothing pool and be washed and stuff to be used for future years to come.
Just 1 second, Mr. Duffy. I'm aware that Office of Sports do provide those swimming classes right around the state and are funded, and it would be with that letter also CN Sports Rex. I know that they're moving from across the road now over to the DPI building, and they are more than happy. They actually fund a lot of those swimming classes. But as what Councillor Greenhouse said, it's about the actual swimwear that I think there's need to be catered for. I did have some questions personally when I first read it. When it comes down to the safety of our children and the many ads that have gone in years gone by, shut the gate, swim, due to our loss of loved ones, including in Orange this year. I think it's vitally important that we somehow unpack it with a letter through to the Minister, but also utilising the various services that are already in town, and it is Office of Sports. They used to be Sports and Recreation.
Can I just ask for a point of clarification then? If we're talking about, as a community, of supplying swimmers and rash tops, surely we aren't expecting students to hand in a pair of Speedos or for the next year, or a rash top for somebody else to wear in this climate that we're living in with COVID and so forth. Assuming that whoever...
Through you, Mr. Chair, the swimming apparel would be retained by the student for the very reasons you describe. We do have a clothing pool and an equipment pool that we operate at the facility. Some people donate to that, and then we make that available to students as they need them, because sometimes kids forget their goggles, for example, and turn up So we give them the goggles and then they return the goggles. But swimming apparel they would retain. It's important to note it's not every child. So lots of families can afford and do pay for their children's entry and apparel. This is the more disadvantaged members of our community that can't meet that cost. And so it's part of the difficulty in to try to project what the demand might be if you to look at the 270 kids or whatever it is that are undertaking these lessons. So that's part of the challenge in trying to wrap a number around it.
Thank you.
Councillor Duffy?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Chairman. I fully support the 2,500 going to Glenroy High School. I have no problem with it whatsoever. Except that I do acknowledge what Councillor Miletto says as regards to the state government probably should look at what they're hearing. That's why I support his resolution. Only got to look at the state budget that's just come down now. I mean, we actually got millions, didn't we? Millions and millions. I mean, do they know where Orange is? I mean, that's one of my questions, but that's not either way. But I want to take up Councillor Miletto's, not Councillor Whitten's comment about the $1,500. With that, but are they asking every council for $1,500 or just us? Are we covering the lot?
Through you, Mr Chair, that's a very good question. I'd need to get clarification from the RDA. Because I guess Councillor Duffy's saying that the 10 for 10 program covers Cabon and Blaney as well.
I think
to some extent.
I'm happy to support it because I think it's better to have them on side when it comes to supporting a major project. I just want to know the question whether, and you can come back to us at a later date if you like.
Thank you, Mr Duffy. Any further? Yes.
Mr Deputy Mayor, thank you. Yeah, I'd just like to also comment on Councillor Miletto's what he just said then, and I fully agree with what he said. I'm also in agreement of the actual recommendation, but what Councillor Miletto said, I think when I first read this, I thought, well, realistically, I think the word borrow there is very blasé. I don't think a lot of this stuff it will go back, for whatever reason, not saying anything outside of that. And I was thinking we would be maybe recurring this fee perhaps year after year, and I'd like to see something else happen where this money could be funded by the state government, whatever. So that's just my thoughts on that. I think if we can do this now, no problems at all, and I agree with the recommendation as I said. But I think ongoing, if we could find a way to curb this. From our coffers and have it come from another area that probably it should be coming from. I think that certainly is a great idea too. Yeah. Thank you.
I do agree, Councillor Floyd. As was already mentioned, that we can provide letters through to the Minister in relation to this here. Also contact our local services, Sports and Rec in relation to this stuff here and see how we can go from there. Any other speakers? Okay, rightio. I put the motion, thank you, Whitten, and seconded by Councillor Duffy, and all in favour? Against and carried. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Calling back now, Mayor, and also Mr Evans. Thank you.
I've incorporated that as a matter of arising, a letter will be written to the Minister in line with Councillor Miletto's.
Thanks, councillors. Sorry about that late declaration of interest. I just realised that my niece and nephew are at Glenroy and I better not be in the room. So that's done 5.4. We'll move on to item 5.5, which is the draft Orange Regional Destination Management Plan, which is on page 179.
Happy to move it.
Thanks, Councillor Miletto. Seconder? Councillor Floyd. Any discussion? Councillor Peterson.
Only to say that on the 15th page, it says the flight time to Sydney is 3.5 hours. I've let the CEO know for change because that's only on a bad day.
Well, wind, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other speakers? Councillor Mallard.
Yeah, Mr Mayor, I'd like to move an amendment that this be deferred until a workshop can be held that involves Orange councillors and that includes discussion of how this plan aligns with the new community strategic plan. If I can get a seconder for that, I'll speak to it.
Councillor McDonald, sorry.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, look, this is not a document that only I, as a new councillor, was aware was coming or had been briefed on. And in looking at it, I've got some reservations. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff in here. I absolutely support growing our tourism sector, and I think there are a whole bunch of ways we can do that sustainably. Yeah, but I'm concerned about some of the aspects in there that don't seem to fit very well with. We've just adopted a community strategic plan that talks about stewardship of Mount Canobolas, but there's an idea in there of a potential skyway on the mountain, in addition to mention of consideration of the mountain bike tracks as well. I'm a little unclear on how this has been developed and the consultation level that's gone on, but also I'm aware that, we've just elected 3 new councils. We have just adopted a new community strategic plan as well that doesn't include these new things, and I feel like this doesn't seem to necessarily align completely with those things, and I think I could certainly do with a bit more time to look at what we're proposing. I really am concerned in that theme around nature-based tourism, that it's really talking about the environment as an asset, which is problematic in itself, and activating those sorts of areas in a way that's really about, sort of privatising the use of some public environmental goods in a way I'm concerned about. So yeah, I'd like us to take a bit of time with this one. I'm concerned that we're being asked not just to put it out on exhibition even, but to endorse the draft plan tonight. I don't feel comfortable proceeding that way. Thanks.
Councillor Miletto.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll speak against the amendment due to the fact that it is a draft document, and there is no reason why we can't make changes to it. I don't believe we can't make changes to it after it comes back from the exhibition period. So if we want to, that'll give us an opportunity to have a look at what people think of the document, provide their feedback, look at their submissions, and then if need be, if we have some concerns around it, then we can have a meeting and discuss those concerns and make changes where appropriate or relevant. So I don't see any need to prolong the exhibition period at this point of time, because I think it's self-explanatory moving forward, and we're going to cover off on Councillor Mallard's concerns. They'll be done in due course. It's not as if we're trying to hide anything here or anything's not being explained. There is a period of 28 days, to allow that to occur. So I'm speaking against the amendment. Thank you.
Councillor Peterson.
I need to speak against the amendment, essentially echoing Councillor Miletto's thoughts, but saying in the 28 days that it's on exhibition would be a great opportunity to have a briefing and meet some of those concerns raised by Councillor Mallard.
I know Councillor McDonald, I'm just going to get Director Rob just to make a few comments, and then I'll come to you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just to clarify the consultation process. So there was a fairly significant consultation process to get to this document. There was industry engagement. As part of that process, there was workshops and conversations with council, the previous council. We started having that conversation, and then we were starting to develop the plan and have brought it back to our new councils. This has been developed with 3 councils, so Cabonne, Blaney and ourselves. Orange 360 has also been a key stakeholder in the development of the destination management plan. You are right, there is a key pillar around nature-based tourism, and that pillar came through that engagement piece, as well as looking at the strategic direction of the other tourism bodies from Destination New South Wales to Country New South Wales, so working through their strategic plans and also some government policy positions. Anything in this document, even when we get through the exhibition period and there's comment, doesn't mean that we will deliver that, that would have to be a council decision. So there's a number of actions in that document and suggestions about how we can grow the visitor economy, but that would come back to this council to deliver any of those specific actions and for discussion. We have aligned it with the CSP. Under the CSP, there is one objective around our tourism strategy. This would become the tourism strategy and the actions that we would deliver following that exhibition, consultation and feedback. It's probably a high-level summary of how we.
Thank you. Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I second the amendment mainly because I agree that something is. I mean, while I was aware that there was work going on behind this, I just assumed that we would be briefed on it as a council before it came to us to endorse. I second Councillor Mallard's concerns about the wording in the recommendation that we are endorsing it. I have no problems with putting it on public exhibition, but I feel like the inclusion of the word endorse sort of implies that we automatically agree with everything that's on it. So I'm not sure whether we can slightly change the wording of that just to make sure it does go on exhibition, but I also have an issue with the word endorse. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Whitten.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be supporting the recommendation. As the director said, it's been a process that's been going on for several years, not just the last council. I think it's even the council before. The sky lift was a motion of Councillor Romano, as if I remember. So it gives the 28-day exhibition period, allows everyone to put in any submissions for or against or changes. So I think we follow that process.
Any others? But Councillor Duffy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm with Councillor Whitten and Councillor Miletto on this one. I think we're going to put it out there for 28 days. Anyone and everyone can have a comment, and let's wait and see what comments come back, and let's assess it from there.
Thank you. I'll put the amendment. All in favour? 3 against. I'll put the motion. All in favour of the motion? Against? Carried. Item 5.6, which is on page 181, update on outstanding questions. Moved by Councillor Duffy. Have a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Whitten. Any speakers? Councillor Kinghorn.
So from page 184.
Yep.
And it was the Infrastructure Policy Committee from the 3rd of the 8th last year. Councillor Kidd asked that the streetlights be considered for the Cargo Road and Borrowdale Drive, as the intersection is very dark at night and not easily seen. Two things. One, there is no intersection between Cargo Road and Borrowdale Drive, as they are parallel. And I assumed he was talking about Cargo Road and Kaiwula Drive, and there are now lights there. So it says matter to be investigated. It's actually been resolved. The geography was correct. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Kinghorn. Oh, sorry, Councillor Greenhalgh. Sorry.
Just a quick question. Some of these matters are quite old.
Oh.
So just a bit of a time frame. Like on the 3rd of the 3rd, 2022, Councillor Duffy asked for a letter to be sent to the Deputy Premier. Like it's one letter. Like, does it normally take a couple of months?
Can you just point out which one that was, Councillor? What
So
page?
it's on page 186. So a matter arising that council write to the Deputy Premier and local state members expressing council's dissatisfaction with the proposed benchmarking of domestic waste management charges. And it says to be finalised. Like, I'm just sort of wondering how long it actually takes us to draft a letter.
Being reminded that, and I'll have to come back to you on this, that some event happened and then the letter wasn't necessary. We'll come back to you if you don't mind.
Yeah. No,
it would be very unusual that we take that many months to send a letter.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a similar question to Tammy. There are quite a few things on here that seem to be quite old. So page 183, the second thing about the AEDs, what's more left to do on that?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Maunder, would you care to comment on this? This one's been a bit fluid, isn't it? We tend to keep some of these things active as they just keep going. Would you care to comment? I mean, I'm happy to go line by line on these. That's what we've done. So would you say that's finished?
Yes, please.
So I can't hear anything.
He's coming to the mic.
Okay.
On that particular item, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, Councillor, on that particular item, the actions in the far column is what we've completed. The matter that's open is the continue to pursue funding. I don't have it in front of me, but it was about pursue funding opportunities as they arise. So I suppose it's a matter of how we deal with that in the table, which is why it's left open, because they come around every 3 to 6 months. So
okay,
that's why it's there. So I suppose we could certainly do better with how we describe that response.
Yeah, even just a comment there saying ongoing opportunities for funding are continuously being assessed. Thank you, Mr. Maunder. I've also got a question about the next line down, which was from May last year, about investigating the need for traffic lights on Bathurst Road. And it says investigation underway. It's been 12 months. Where are we at on that?
Mr. Greenham, care to comment?
Thank you, Councillor. Through the Mayor, if I may, the lights on Bathurst Road and Bathurst Road itself are a Transport for New South Wales asset. We have started conversations with them back at that time, and there's been a number of staff changeovers during this time with Transport staff. So it hasn't been finalised yet, but it's still on our agenda.
Okay. Maybe again with this comment like progress hampered by staff issues. Just because from my perspective, I'm looking at things on this table and I'm like, well, why is it taking a year to do this? And it just says investigation underway. So maybe if you could take it on board for staff that there's a bit more of an update in there, I suppose, in terms of where you're at with things.
Thank you. Thank you.
Point of a clarification through you, if that's okay, Mr. Mayor. So, Mr. Maunder, and it sounds funny saying that to you. Scott, do you mind giving, so just on that AED one, so we've obviously investigated an app for that. So would that be something like the parks app that we're doing, like the locations of the parks and so forth?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, Councillor, there's an app that exists at the moment that identifies where all the AEDs are, and you can update that. So it's not something that we needed to develop ourselves.
Okay.
So we can make that available. There's also websites available for that. It's the difficulty is, of course, in the instant that you need one, then you're not generally reaching for an app. But if people knew it was there and had no alternative, then it's certainly of benefit. So
just another point of clarification. So as a sporting organisation like Bloomfield Junior Rugby League, how do we register that we've got one of those so it goes on that?
I'll have to come back to you. It's not our app, Councillor.
It's a private app.
Okay.
So I can come back to you with that.
Yeah, perfect.
Direction.
Thank you.
Can I have a point of clarification through you,
Sure.
Mr. Mayor, as well? On the same story, when this originally was, this topic was brought up by Councillor Miletto last year, the idea was to try and get greater community awareness of where the AEDs were. And I think we've talked about this since as well. And most of the ones that you've got listed are the government ones. And with what Councillor Greenhouse was saying about, with the football club, we have one at our pharmacy. No one's ever asked. So the original, motion about doing that was to try and find out who had them, and there's probably no reason we can't do that at a council level, is there? Asking businesses whether they have one, and making it aware so that people aren't using some random app from God knows where.
I'd agree, Councillor, that there's no reason we couldn't seek that information to collate it from businesses and private entities that say, if you've got an AED, can you let us know? And then we can see what we can do about making that information public and readily available.
We have a sign in our window, but it matters because then somebody were to have a really serious cardiac event, then their chances of dying are pretty high unless they have access to an AED. And in Seattle, I think it is, that's got the highest survival rate of people who have cardiac arrests because there are so many AEDs. So if it could be incorporated with a campaign to encourage people to get them, that would be great. But at least if people knew where they were, then it could be closer that the worst was to happen to somebody. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, it was myself who raised it, and most AEDs have locators built into them.
Yep.
They locate themselves to the app, right? So, for example, Octec has 5 in the building, but it would probably be a better idea to actually put the information on council's website, right? To do that, even if it's pointing to the app itself, you know. So you're dead right, Councillor Kinghorn. I think it's the ratio, you've got a 1 in 9 chance of dying if you have a heart attack without it before the ambulance gets to you.
Life and death stuff, isn't it? It does matter.
Councillor Powell. Oh. Councillor McDonald.
I just had a point of clarification too. On page 203, the item that refers to the third item down about the ASB, the council staff in the comment is talking about superannuation, but the motion wasn't about super, it was about the special rate variation. Is that correct?
Oh, I see. It appears you're correct, Councillor.
Just appears?
On the face of it, I will correct that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other speakers? No other speakers. I'll put the motion. All in favour? Against? Carried. I'll need a resolution that we go to close council.
Councillor Duffy, Councillor Greenhow.
The Chief Executive Officer will advise if the council, if any written submissions have been received relating to any item advertised for consideration by closed meeting by Orange City Council.
Mr. Mayor, unfortunately, there have been no such written submissions.
In accordance with Local Government Act 1993 and the Local Government General Regulation 2005, in the opinion of the Chief Executive Officer, the following businesses is of kind as referred in section 10A/2 of the Act and should be dealt with in a confidential session of the council meeting closed to the press and public. Item 6.1, am I reading this or what? Yep. Submission reductions 23rd of June 2022. This item is classified confidential under provision of section 10A2 of the Local Government Act 1993, which permits the meeting to be closed to the public for business relating to the information that would be, if disclosed, prejudice the maintenance of law.